have is actually the who's who of the herbal medicine world. What's so exciting about this panel is that as I've been learning more and more about this movement and industry, the individuals whose papers I've read, those I've looked for their advice are all on this panel. And I think you'll see there are a lot of parallels to the herbal medicine world, to some of the struggles that we're fighting now. So please welcome our next panel.
Hi everyone, my name is Louis Grossman. I'm a professor of law at American University, of counsel at the law firm of Covington and Burling, and a specialist in food and drug law, and my scholarly interest is on medical libertarian movements throughout U.S. history. We have an extraordinarily accomplished panel with us today, and rather than introducing them all now, let me introduce them seriatim as they come up. Our first presenter is Dr. Lyle E. Craker, who's going to talk about the early history of botanicals in the United States. Dr. Craker is a professor in the Department of Plant, Soil, and Insect Sciences at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. And since 2005, he's been trying to obtain a permit from the DEA to grow marijuana for research purposes.
I'm really happy to be here because this is an exciting time. I'm really excited because things are happening, and we've been waiting for that a long, long time, it seems to me, for at least quite a few years, and the years seem to drag on, but maybe we're making some advancement here that's really going to mean something. So Steph, thanks very much for inviting me. I really appreciate that, and I'm glad to see all of you here. Well, I hope this thing works. It does, that's good. I was asked to give a kind of a brief history of what's been done with botanicals. Not focusing on cannabis, but instead looking at some of the other plants and trying to bring together for us a system of where we're going and how things have gone before. Some of the things that our earlier speaker here talked about, some things we need to look at and wonder how to handle them. And that's part of my objective here today, to try and take a look at it for you. First of all, I thought we should have some definitions so that we know what we're really talking about. We need to, when we're talking about medicines and we're talking about plant material, we need to know what we're talking about. And I think that probably everyone here has some concept, but when it comes down to actual things, sometimes people get a little mixed up. So yes, we're talking about plants, we're talking about medicines, and of course we need to talk about the afflictions that people deal with and where they're going to use these plants. They'll use it as medicine. So that's an important place to start. And once we have that beginning, I then come to the thought process here that I've been teaching here for the last, a few years anyway. I tell students that there are three things that we have to think about when we look at these things that are associated with medicinal plant material. And that is there's a mythology that's associated with so many of our plants, that they're good for this, there's ceremonies that go with them, what do they mean, how they've been used. And these myths have carried from historical times into the present. I frequently ask the students in reference to sage, how many have a sage, a bunch of sage hanging in their kitchen? And still some do. Of course, it means that it's a happy household. But that's a myth. I don't think the sage itself causes a happy household. It's certainly a myth. Also, there is a tradition associated with many of these plant materials that comes together, and we have to think about historically how they've been used. And then there's science. And we live in an age of science. We live in an age of science is worship today. we kind of forget about the mythology, we forget about the tradition, and we work with the science, and people want to see scientific proof for everything. That works sometimes, and it's okay. But I found something new when I came to marijuana, talking about this, that there was some other thing besides myth and tradition and science, and that was something called the government. And the government's like a black cloud, it just overrules everything. It can overrule myth, science, and tradition completely, and that's something we ran into here, certainly in looking at cannabis as a medicinal plant. I think there are some things we need to work with, and we're thinking about medicine. And I tried to put together here at the beginning of a little chart with some things that kind of tie off to the medicine. And if we take a look at that, we can see that medicine, that there's certainly some things associated with it that are important. And as we go forward, we need to keep these things in mind, that there are various roles that the government plays, there are various roles that advocates play on both sides of the fence. These things are important that we keep focused on them and recognize them and see them as something that we need to work with when we outline what we're going to accomplish. Well, I'm supposed to give a brief history here of plant control, and so introduction that maybe we can start looking at that. I've drew a circle here because things seem to circle in life. They come and they go. And I want to begin back here with American history. When people first came to the United States, came to America, I guess I should say, the Native Americans had some medicines that they used. Much of it to do with visions that they used. But certainly they used other plant material also. They knew plant material that could help heal wounds because they got scratches and had tummy aches and other problems that we face in modern society. So we could start there. We move on to the people that came then, the settlers, the first ones here. Man, did they have it tough. Landed in Massachusetts, as a matter of fact, and thank goodness the story goes, the Indians that were there helped them survive. But they brought some plant material with them, of course, because they knew they needed medicine. But they had to forage in the wild. They had to learn what would be good for them for American plants. So that's certainly a thing. And if we go past the settlers, then we have people here in the Revolutionary War. I thought was the next stage. And what was the medicine? Because whenever you have war, you have a lot of wounded, a lot of hurt people, and to think about what they would use. And then we go on to just a circle here. The Civil War came in the late 1800s, the early 1900s, the 1930s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 60s, 70s, the 80s, here, wherever, the 90s, 2000s, the present. This time passes on, and everything gets closer together because things are happening readily. Well, if we start here with the early settlers, of course, the pioneers had these kitchen gardens. I mean, the wife usually did, the mother had a garden outside of her kitchen door where she could gather herbs for flavoring meals and, of course, herbs for helping to heal different things. She grew those right next to the kitchen door where she could get at them. As we move on to the Revolutionary War, they had opium, they had ginger, they had spilt. These were the medicines that they had. Not much, but certainly the opium could take away the pain. Of course, that was important. If we then go to the Civil War, we find that most of the medicine was bleeding and purging. I don't think the bleeding helped the patients too much, and the purging probably didn't help that much either. But certainly they did have some medicine. Quinine, of course, coming from the cinchona tree bark to use to help reduce fevers. They had amputation was a big thing. So these are things, the kind of medicine that they had. If we move from the Civil War to the late 1800s, opium was a medicine. I mean, you could buy opium, necessarily by prescription, but it was certainly available for people. And the other medicines that came in during this time period, meadowsweet and bark as pain relievers. But one of the things that did take place was the American Medical Association formed in 1847, and that became a very powerful political voice that still resonates today with us. If we go from there to 1900s, the medical associations were classified into different ones, and they had practiced a different type of operation, not operation for cutting apart, but different type of medical practices that we had. This was a time of weaning out in America a type of medical system that we would have. So that these different ones, I think we can look at it as different practices that were tried. Some have been more fortunate than others, some have worked out better than others, and certainly that's something that needed to be done as we weaned ourselves into one type of medicine that we have. If we go on to the 1930s and 1940s, man, this was exciting because we had vaccinations, we began to develop the antibiotics, which made such differences in the health of people. I think we take them as routine now, so that many of the tragic diseases that went on have been cured by this. So this is certainly a big step forward in medicine. Going into the 1970s and 80s, we learned about government restrictions on some things that today with the passage of laws restricting the use of marijuana, for example. And in the 1990s and 2000s, I looked at this as a time of change that went on, that we began to look again at traditional medicines that come back. If we look at that, and we just look at what happened here, and tried to draw this loop so that we could see what goes on. In the early part of the time period here, in the less than the 1900s, it was acceptance of natural product medicines. Everybody could use them. Everybody used them because that was primarily what they had. But as we progressed here along, we had a transition in the 1900s and 1940s when the Flexner report came out and changed the scope of medical schools. We had this more formal type of medical association, medical doctors being trained a certain way, so that natural products began to disappear because they were getting a little, I don't say a bad reputation, but it was a movement time away from nature into more science as opposed to traditional type of things. If you could demonstrate it, people could do things, and it was worth doing. But if we continue on here into the 1940s and into the early 1970s, there began to be an abandonment of the traditional medicine entirely. Okay, we abandoned it entirely until we came into the mid-1970s, 1980s, beginning with the flower children in California who were dancing with flowers and using natural type of products. We had this new insight to look. And again, it was the population that began looking at this. Certainly this was fought by the American Medical Association, that people using traditional medicine. I've heard so many stories about patients telling me, medical people telling me, the nurse telling me first, that people are taking some natural products. They're afraid to tell the doctor because the medical doctor will be angry during this time period. They tell the nurse because the nurse would be more accepting, they hope. So it was a time of transition here. And as we move on looking at the early mid-1990s or so, is an acknowledgement that maybe there is something here. And as we progress through, we can see that in the integration of the 1990s and 2000, the medical doctors began to say it was okay to use medicine. And we've reached the point here where acceptance of natural products, along with traditional, the synthetic medicines or the modified medicines that we get. Well, just to show you some examples of what has happened here, I did a few surveys of literature. I looked at ginkgo, for example, and a plant that has medicinal properties. If we look at the literature that has to do with the use of ginkgo, science writing on ginkgo, very, very little in the beginning of the 1980 there, hardly any articles, but as we move on, we can see there's a lot more science being done. Really people interested in this and people moving on to look at this as a natural product. And I also took a look here at looking at the African medicinal plants because things come from different places in the world, and again, very little in the beginning, but again, a rapid increase in the number of journal articles that have to do with these type of plant materials, which indicates to me again a large interest that science has been waiting to look at these, and now it's acceptable to look at these. I did the same kind of search today, just to show you where we are. I did a search this morning on cannabis and journal articles, and I found a total of 24 in a Commonwealth Agriculture Bureau search, as the others were done. So we're down at the lower part of the curve yet, but we're moving. We are moving, and we're moving up here. So more is going to come. Well, if one takes a look at the U.S. Pharmacopoeia formulary, a lot of plant medicines that we're well aware were used in the early, late 1800s, early 1900s. But this changed as we became more what we call a Western type of medicine, with the emphasis on science and the emphasis on using specialized products, antibiotics, and vaccinations, that we really decreased the number of plant materials being used in our pharmaceutical formulary for the United States. But I'm also excited, kind of excited anyway, because it looks like to me, I think that in the 2000s we've jumped up a little bit, right? We're getting back into some of the plant materials being accepted into the formulary and the pharmacopoeia. I'm only up to 2007. I have some students working on the later years though, because this is exciting if people are really coming back to accepting some of these types of medicines as units to be in our official list of medicines. I want to emphasize to you that there's a lot of plants that are used. We may not know that we use them all. This is not a complete list. I checked, the last time I checked, there were over 100 types of plant materials that are used in medicine, or extracts from the plants are used in medicine. The common ones that most people hear of course, are foxglove, which the original extract came from the foxglove plant to increase the power of the heart as it pumped blood through the body and prevent edema. I mean, the swelling of the body, if you look at any books, they like to put pictures of it. People back before this plant was discovered by Dr. Withering. They laid them on a bed of nails, and so they'd bleed. And of course, that was the wrong thing to do because they thought they had too much blood in them. Well, that takes care of it, I guess. You put them on a bed of nails, and maybe you sit on them too. I don't know. But instead, we know now that the heart gets enlarged because it needs to pump more. And certainly, the use of foxglove helps. But we have other medicines. 100, over 100 plants that just commonly show up being used. That brings us to something we need to discuss in talking about any type of plant material that we're going to use, and that's a balance between the medicinal use and the recreational use. And certainly that's true in cannabis, and we're going to have to face that. We're going to have to decide how we're going to face that. Are we going to encourage both? Are we going to encourage one? Are we going to down one? I don't know, but that's certainly something that we need to think about, because recreational use of any drug is frowned upon in this country, whether it's cannabis or something else. But if it's used for medicine, then people are sometimes okay. So that bridge will need to be crossed and see which way it does. Well, just to try and look at this again, the current drug system we have is not perfect. You can see that the death toll from misuse of pharmaceuticals does occur. The thing I looked at told me a death every 19 minutes in the U.S. from misuse of medicine. Well, what we have to decide here, I guess, is when we're thinking about all this. I tried to illustrate that here. We have this alternative, which we're trying to get away from, and going to this alternative, which we're trying to look forward to, and hoping that everything works in this direction. And it will, I think, if we take a close look at everything. I did want to tell you that puppies are for hugging. Puppies are fun, nice, but there are some plants that are dangerous, and we should be aware of those. If the law becomes acceptable to marijuana, some of you may want to look at other plant materials that are kind of illegal to use, but we need to be careful, and there's a list there. I put it in red to warn you we don't have a list of those. I think it's time. I think it's happened. I come back to my mythology and my tradition and science, and I want to throw away the not approved by the U.S. Department, by the U.S. government, because I think we've reached that here with cannabis. I think we're looking at now what we can look at. Well, myth, just to give you an example of myth, so that everybody understands. Golden seal I picked on. Myth is it helps you cover up for using illegal drugs. That's a myth. It doesn't do anything for you that way. Science, we know it's an antimicrobial type of compound with possible cardiovascular effects. And then we have tradition from the U.S., and it's been used for a long time to help with inflammation and bitter tonic and that. So we have those things that go on. I don't think we want to go back to this. This is the beginning of pharmacy. I took this picture in Nigeria, and this is their drugstore. You can see natural products. I think we're beyond that. Probably don't want to go back to that. Here's what I see as the perfect solution, that we have the pharmacists and the herbalists working together to help with natural medicine and the conventional medicines, so that we working together, a partnership, we can provide the best health care that is possible. Thank you.